Muted.
Okay. So this is Heather, the one that I've been trying to get forever. Forever.
Call me out.
Yes, I did. You would have done the same. Right? Okay. Alrighty. So Cheyenne's starting to go to meeting. I'm just going to, for those of you who haven't met her, this is Dr. Hayden. And as you can tell by my email this morning, I'm very excited that he's here because I think he's awesome. So I'll let him explain to you why he's awesome.
It's funny, when I introduce myself to people, sometimes I'll say, I'm Chase, and they're like, oh, cool. I'm like, yeah, I'm famous on my website. And they're like, oh, okay. And some people get it like that I'm making a joke, and some people are like, oh, that's neat, you're famous. It's like, it's my website, I made it, so who cares, right? This is me and my family. It's my wife, Stephanie, my son, my daughters. He's 10, she's 8, she's 6. I enjoy what I do. I enjoy hanging out with them. They're good people. But we're going to be here today to figure out what we can do from just a health standpoint. Maybe this doesn't work.
Is it working before?
Maybe nothing works. Let's try it again. There we go. All right, so my office is called the Hayden Institute. Technically, by profession, I'm a doctor of chiropractic. I have certifications in quantum neurology and applied clinical nutrition. And when I introduce myself, depending on how the conversation is going to go, I usually just tell people I'm a chiropractor, and they immediately think, oh, I've got back pain, can you give me a massage or something? And I'm like, yeah, that's why I introduced myself as a chiropractor, because I knew it was going to be a short conversation. But in real life practice, from a chiropractic standpoint, my office is a little bit different. We do a lot of stuff that is chiropractic, like we get people with car wrecks, and we get people with back pain and headaches. But the great majority of my practice deals with alternative medicine and functional health. With that being said, we get people that have like autoimmune conditions and thyroid problems, and they can't get pregnant, and they can't sleep well, or have digestive issues or whatever. And we look at them structurally, neurologically, and nutritionally, essentially trying to figure out what we can do to help them out. So what we're going to do through today's little class presentation is I'll show you some examples of people that come into the office, and we'll talk about why we did what we did with them and how that might apply to something in your particular lives. We'll fly through that, and then at the end, I'll pull out the dry erase board, and we'll just answer your specific questions, because I want you to be able to get something out of this and not just see me brag about people that I see in the office. Does that make sense? So we'll try and do that and go from there. So first off and foremost, going out of chiropractic school, my original thought was I was going to be a sports doctor. I went through a lot of training with sports medicine and sports rehabilitation for 6 years, 5 years. I was the team doctor at the men's clay court championship here in Houston, and I treat players and referees and umpires and things like that every year whenever they come through at River Oaks Country Club, and that was a lot of fun. Got to meet a lot of cool players, work with them, and got to use my chiropractic and sports background to work with them. I have another patient who's a professional golfer, and he qualified for the U.S. Open. He said, hey, man, come on up to the U.S. Open with me, work with me for a week. I want to be able to see you before and after each round and talk with you and make sure that I'm doing what I need to do. We still see some of these guys in the office because in my background of sports and chiropractic, they think, hey, let's go do sports and chiropractic, and we help them out. Same thing, U.S. Open, you're able to help them out and do that. So have baseball players, football players. People just come in because they see chiropractic, they see sports. We have an aspect of our practice that helps in that area. The number one thing that all of these people had in mind, actually not the tennis people, but the golfer and the baseball player and some of the other athletes that come in, is they take it beyond just getting a back crack because they have shoulder pain or neck pain or whatever. With these individuals that are at the top of their field, we're looking at them still structurally, neurologically, and nutritionally, because those areas are going to affect performance in every aspect of our life. So in their particular profession, it's important for them to be able to hit the ball straight and far without pain, and they'll do whatever they need to do to be able to do that. So they get chiropractic stuff done, they get massage done, they do acupuncture, they're on a specific nutritional program, etc. Like Tom Brady with the Super Bowl being here just this last weekend. He eats gluten-free and dairy-free, does not put sugar in his body at all. Drew Brees, he's a gluten-free, dairy-free guy. He eats a specific way because during the season, they want to be able to recover quicker. They want to have controlled body weight and body fat percentages. They want to be able to be pain-free. And they know that through working with their dietitians or their nutritionists, they're able to manage that. During the off-season, Drew Brees talks about how he puts a little bit more dairy in his life because he doesn't care if he gains an extra 10 pounds. But when it comes closer to preseason and the football season, it comes out, his diet shifts again in order for him to prepare for the performance that he needs. Now this just happens with sports people, but sometimes you get other individuals. This guy here is just like a, I don't know, probably 53, 55-year-old insurance salesman. He was out playing with the kids, twisted his leg, and this was how it looked like when he came in. Severe bruising, everything like that. So we went through and said, structurally, this is what's going on. Nutritionally, this is what's going on. And neurologically, this is what's going on. So 3 days later, it looked like that, which is kind of neat to see the differences in how his foot was able to recover when the appropriate treatment was given for the particular action. This particular kid here, this is in an office in Utah that I worked at for a little bit, and we were covered in the newspaper because he was a kid born with he was hemiplegic. So part of his brain did not develop like it should, so his right side of his body did not work. And so they'd stick him in the swim team, and he could kind of flounder this arm, and he could move his legs, but he could use his real arm like he wanted to, and he was going like this through life. When he would swim or when he would walk, he would kind of walk in this way. And so they started bringing him to our office. This guy owns the clinic, and that's my arms there, being famous. Never joking. So what happened with him is his eyes were able to start tracking and doing what they needed to do. By the end of a couple of sessions, he was able to get full range of motion with his shoulder and with his arm by addressing the neurologic side specifically and monitoring his diet a little bit. There are certain foods that tend to enhance performance, and there are certain foods that tend to distract from performance, whether it's professional athlete, 10-year-old boy, or everyday professional. And we're going to go over some of those today as to what works well and what doesn't and how we can get there. So let's talk about this other person. She's a 26-year-old female that came in as referral from her female doctor. She was given Synthroid, which is a thyroid-based medication. A lot of you may have heard of this before. You probably know a female that's taken Synthroid because about 1 in every 3 in America is on it. This person, though, if you looked at her in the mall walking down the street, you'd think you're the healthiest, perfect, good-looking girl. 125 pounds, blonde hair, looks like a model, walks in the office and she's jacked up on the inside. Her blood work is all over the place, but the doctor did some tests with her and said, I don't know what's going on. We're going to run this test to see if you have an autoimmune condition. So the autoimmune condition, this is what her blood work looks like. Imagine, this is a normal everyday person. You would look at her at the mall and not think anything about her. Yet on the inside, her hair's falling out. She's always tired. Her digestion's terrible. She can't sleep at all. She's having a hard time maintaining employment because she just sleeps throughout the day. She'd get to her desk, and they'd go find her in her cubicle, and she'd just be sitting there asleep. They'd have no idea how long she had been there or what was happening. And so this is what happened. She goes to the doctor. For those of you that are not doctors in the room, these are the normal ranges. So we see 0 to 34 as a normal range, and 2041, when a flag that says it's high, that's something that's weird. That's not supposed to be there, right? It's just it's a little out of range, right? So the doctor, the OBGYN that ran this blood test said, that's really interesting. I've never seen that before, and I don't know what to do. So go out of my office and go find somebody else that can help you. By the way, there's this weird guy down the road that does some nutritional stuff. He might know what to do, but I don't know. He's a chiropractor. He's probably a quack. That's kind of how the conversation went in their office. But she shows up, and this, of course, is what her blood work looks like. So a month later, so you can kind of see, not really with this thing, but on November 12th of that year, that's what it was. By December 22nd, that number was relatively the same. Like it had not gone down very much. And she came in to see me shortly after this because her doctor was running these tests and saying, we're just going to keep monitoring it every 4 to 6 weeks. Go see this guy and we'll see what happens. So she comes in, and obviously she's stressed out because she's living life. She's got a divorce going on. She can't lose weight. Even though she looks good, she wasn't where she wanted to be. And she had all this stuff going on in her life. For her, all we did was remove one food from her life, and that was gluten. We took gluten out of her life, and I said, do this until next week when I see you again, because I've got a binder, a 3-week binder with a blood test and other stuff I need to go through. And I need to figure out what's going on with you, but between now and then, just remove gluten, and we'll see what happens. Now, the reason we asked her to remove gluten is because this particular test, when it's positive, indicates that she has a disease called Hashimoto's autoimmune thyroiditis. Has anyone ever heard of that before? Hashimoto's, Hashi. So hypothyroidism is what led her to get on this drug called Synthroid. A subcategory of hypothyroidism is Hashimoto's, which is where you have an antibody response, where your immune system munching around like Pac-Man on your thyroid, which causes the hypothyroidism, or the thyroid to not work like it's supposed to. So with her thyroid not working like it's supposed to, she's having her hair falling out, she can't lose the weight she wants, her sleep is shutting down, her digestion is not doing what it needs to do. So her doctor correctly prescribed her Synthroid, which is what should have happened. Then when the patient wasn't getting better, she said, I got to go dig in to see what's going on here, and she found these tests that were out of range. Synthroid does not address an immune problem, though. It's a thyroid-based medication, and the doctor didn't know what to do for someone that had an immune problem to this severity. But the clinical research tells us that Hashimoto's autoimmune thyroiditis is basically like celiac disease for the thyroid. And so all we did was took her off of gluten, which is what makes celiac disease, a digestive problem, worse. And we said, let's see what happens until I see you again. In 1 week, she comes back. She had lost 5 pounds. Her hair was not coming out anymore. She said she slept through the whole night for the first time in months. And it's like night and day difference in her particular body. Now, in this individual, the traditional medical model is provide Synthroid and just monitor the test and see what happens, because there's no official treatment for Hashimoto's autoimmune thyroiditis. It's only on the fringes of research that people would look at that and say, maybe it's a dietary issue. So in this particular person, she responded exceptionally well from it, and her antibodies eventually ended up going down to untraceable once she got off of gluten, which is found in like wheat, barley, and rice. So she didn't drink beer anymore, she didn't have bread, she didn't have pasta, she didn't have things like that. And by doing that, her health returned to normal. And it didn't involve a medication, it did not involve some type of surgery, it was just her modifying her diet to eat appropriately for what her body was asking it to do. And she turned back to more or less normal 26-year-old person. So this one's a little bit interesting. Once again, if we look at blood work, the things in yellow are important. I tried highlighting them for us. This is a traditional lipid panel. When you go to your doctor, he tells you your cholesterol is high. This is what he's looking at. You'll notice in range category is blank, out of range category is jacked up, right? Triglycerides should be in a range, oh, it's not in here, it should be less than 200, and his are 2.5 times that. His total cholesterol should also be less than 200, more than it should be. His good cholesterol, his HDL, should be above 35, which is not, I'm sorry, which is a little bit low. And his LDL cholesterol, or his bad cholesterol, the numbers were so hard that they could not even measure them in their blood work. So keep in mind, this is happening on November 13th. This is what this guy's blood work is. His doctor basically told him, you are at risk of death if you don't change this. The side effect of too high cholesterol and not having a good ratio here in these numbers, you're going to have a heart attack and stroke out and die if you don't get something squared away. Now the reason I share this one is because not because I was a doctor in the year 2000, but because this is my dad's blood work. And so in 2000, he comes home. I'm a senior in high school at this point, and he basically says, look, guys, doctor says I'm going to die if I don't change some things. We've got to change some stuff in the house. I'm like, great. So he flies out and goes and sees this doctor in Las Vegas that practices similarly to how I practice, because he was referred to him by a friend. From November 13th until 12/9 of the same month, his triglycerides dropped from 477 to 157. His total cholesterol dropped from 256 to 165. His good cholesterol is still lower than it should be. His bad cholesterol became readable or traceable on the blood work, and his risk of heart disease and stroke, which is mostly manifest by this number, started going in the right direction. Now, is it perfect? No. But in little under, a month, just under a month, he had a significant difference in all of these markers that are increasing his risk of premature death, decreasing his performance, and affecting not only his life, but that of the life of his family. So that's a cool blood work thing. He's still alive today. This person here is another person that's close to me and my family, and it's my sister. So growing up with this young lady here, she's like 42 now. This was maybe 3 years ago. Grew up high school athlete, played basketball in high school, went to college and played basketball, always fit and athletic her whole life, and then became less active. Just normal everyday person. She started having kids. She stopped working out every day. She started just doing her normal everyday life being a mom. And she woke up one day and said, man, I don't like where I am. I want to lose some weight. Her numbers and her blood work looked good, but she just didn't feel good. She was tired all the time. She wasn't sleeping well, etc. So she talks with me. She's like, well, you're a doctor. What should I do about it? I said, well, we're going to change what you eat. Because if we change what we eat, we change what our fuel is able to use to produce the rest of us. And so this was her about 6 months after we started doing stuff here. And you can see there's a difference from just like, look at arm sizes and way she distributes her weight, etc. All from dietary changes that what we're going to talk about today may be a little bit different than what you would have expected her to do. Because when we talk about a healthy diet, we sometimes get different answers. Like if I asked a vegetarian what a healthy diet would be, their response may be different than someone who follows like a caveman diet. And their response may be different from someone who owns and works at a bread factory. And their diet recommendations may be different from someone else that lives in like, you know, Alaska, like an Eskimo. And like the differences of healthy diets vary from where you're from, your religious or cultural background, and so forth. And so we want to try and adapt these modified food programs to accommodate all of them, but essentially give us the right physiology or the way our bodies are supposed to work in order to get where we want to be. This is a patient in the office. She was having a bad day, so she looked back through her Facebook feed and found this picture of herself and realized that, you know what, I've done a lot of good work in the last year or so, and I'm just going to keep plugging along. And she shared that on Facebook. It's really cool. This person, so since October 2014, just over 2 years now, she's lost 174 pounds as of last week. Eating, how I'm going to share with you guys how to eat. So if weight loss is something you want to look into, this might be something worth pursuing. If removing autoimmune type activity in your life might be something to look into. Like, there's a lot of application for what we're looking at here, not just athletic performance and not just weight loss and not just autoimmune things and not just infertility or whatever it might be. So I don't know if y'all can see it very well on the screen. This girl here has a bunch of red rashes all over her. You know, see that at all?
Yeah.
Okay, this is a result of letting your husbands watch your kids. No, she's joking. Kind of joking. Kind of joking. So the mom's going out on the town with the girls. She leaves the kids home with the dad. The dad's like, hey, this is great. Let's have an Oreo cookie night, and we'll eat that for dinner. And this girl has a reaction to food dyes. So she had Oreo cookies and Jell-O for dinner because the dad was like, here, this is in the cupboard, eat this. And so the next morning she wakes up and she's got just from head to toe all over her body. They're about the size anywhere between a nickel to a quarter, slightly raised hive type reaction. And so her mom's freaking out. She's like, what do I do? She comes in. But at this point, we had already removed the dyes and the chemicals from the food. Like, she wasn't supposed to eat them. She had one exposure to them. So I couldn't really do like, hey, go gluten-free for the next 6 months and let's see what happens. You know, she's having the reaction right now. So we had to give her a supplement of an herb that kind of works like Benadryl and just opened up some things. And that was day one. Is what it looked like. 8 hours later, the rash, it got better. Then it started to come back again. And then by the third day, it was completely gone. So it's neat to see what you can do without the need of medication. And so this was a kid that was, let's see, how old was she? 7. Okay, she was 7 years old. She had a reaction. The first thought was her mom said, I don't want to give her something like Benadryl that's going to knock her out and not let me be responsive to her. How can I help my child without potentially like just drugging her out? And not that Benadryl is evil. It's just she was trying to do something in a different way. So we were able to use some herbs to do that. Because I get interesting things in my office, this was something else that came into my office.
Oh, wow.
So how many of you, when you step on a screw and have your foot, say, let's go to the chiropractor and see what you should do? But this is what we get in the office, though. That has nothing to do with diet or anything. It's just a very interesting case that came into my office, and I thought I'd share with you. And our last one.
Oh, my gosh.
I'm just joking. That's didn't come into my office. It's sometimes what happens, though, when you have surgical instruments that come up missing off your checklist after the report. You see things like this. But no, the moral of the story being, in our office, we do a lot of stuff that involves complementary and alternative medicine from a structural, neurological, and nutritional standpoint. And there's intertwining mechanisms between every presentation that we have, From the kid that just stepped on the screw and got the screw stuck in his foot, there's a nutritional, a neurological, and a structural component to getting that person to heal better. The girl that had the autoimmune condition and was now having Pac-Man lunch on her thyroid, structural, chemical, nutritional, neurological standpoint to help these people get better. And those are just people that we see in our office. But more importantly, you guys may have questions. So we're going to talk a little bit about some of the basic stuff that I would typically do with someone that walks into my office. Can I take this and just move it?
Yeah, absolutely.
If I lean it against the screen, will anybody be offended?
Only if you break it.
The rest is okay.
Your IP guys,
The rest is okay? All right. So we have a presentation of someone who walks in the office. Let's pretend you want to lose weight. Let's pretend you can't sleep well, or you have a screw sticking out of the bottom of your foot, or you have an autoimmune condition, or you're trying to get pregnant and you can't, or whatever we want to be. There is something called an inflammatory cascade that happens in all physiologic disruptions in the body. So you have a cell that's not working like it's supposed to, and that cell starts inflammation. Inflammation is the first thing that happens when a cell becomes dysfunctional, and then enough cells become dysfunctional to now you have tissue inflammation, and then enough of those become dysfunctional to where now your liver is throwing out enzymes, or your cholesterol is going up, or you can't walk on your foot, or whatever. We need to start at the cause. We need to decrease inflammation at some point in our body. How might we do that? Because oftentimes when I talk with patients about this, we say, hey, I've got inflammation, but my knee isn't swollen. Why are you telling me there's inflammation there? Or I have inflammation, but I can still walk and move. Why is my liver telling me through the blood work that I've got enzymes that are up when I feel normal? Like I don't feel pain there, so what do I do about it? In a traditional injury, like if you were playing baseball and you hurt your shoulder and it started to get inflamed, you would lose motion, you would stick it closer to your body, it might get red, it might get tender to the touch, and we'd probably do a couple of things to try and make that inflammation in that area get better. Typically, we would rice it. If I said that to y'all, what does that mean? If I said rice your shoulder after an injury? Rest. Ice. Compress. Elevation. That would be the traditional approach to stopping inflammation to a injury on the outside of your body. Now, let's pretend you're Hashimoto's person and your thyroid is now injured. How do you rice that? How do you tell your thyroid to rest? Or if you put ice on your throat, is that really what it's going to do with trying to get your thyroid to? It's not. If you have high cholesterol, how do you rice your cholesterol creation pathways? Or if your liver is throwing out enzymes and you have cirrhosis of the liver or fatty liver, how do you do it there? If your brain is not letting you control and function appropriately at work and you can't pay attention when you're typing on the keyboard and you have to rewrite the same sentence 8 times because you don't remember what you were doing, how do you rice your brain? And if you go to sleep and it's not your 3-year-old kids waking up in the middle of the night and you still can't get through a whole night without sleeping because you have to get up and go to the restroom 2 or 3 times, how do you rice your kidneys or your bladder or your sleep pathways? So that's the question we have to try and get to the bottom of for each and every one of us that may have a symptom that we want to try and get to the bottom of, is how do we determine where the inflammation is coming from, and now how do we start getting that inflammation to change and go through its normal healing process. So I will take your suggestions, and I'll tell you what I would do. So what would you do? If you had a thyroid or a liver or whatever problem that's not on the outside, because we can see it when it comes to a shoulder or to a knee or something like that, but if it was something else, how might you think we could reduce inflammation? Diet. I like that answer. What did you think?
Hydrate.
Diet. I'm sorry, what was the next one?
Hydrate.
Hydrate. Water or alcohol or which one? Probably water, right? So increasing water might work. Anything else? Maybe supplements. So walk into GNC and grab 6 of everything, or let's do target specific nutrition.
What about some kind of cleansing?
Okay, Can I use that word, or is that too much of a hippie word?
I'll tell you hippies in here.
That goes with your supplements.
Okay, so maybe these are the same, maybe they're not. Because if someone walks in, for example, and they have pain, we might give them a different supplement than someone who comes in and has high blood pressure. Is that correct? Or?
Yes.
Okay, could make sense, right? So maybe we want to be specific in our recommendations rather than going to GNC and emptying the bucket and walking out, right?
I'm going to go see my chiropractor.
Great idea. Dr. Hayden. No. So medical advice, so medical help. What else?
Help me figure out maybe some activities that you're doing if you're causing
Re-injury, maybe?
Yeah.
Are we doing
Physical activity, but also like mental activity, like how you're trying to run businesses and your stress levels are causing your body to fail.
So maybe stress management?
Yeah.
That kind of make sense? Anybody else think of something else that we might have a controllable factor on to be able to help our body to go through the inflammatory process?
Sleep.
Sleep? All right, so let's use a hypothetical. And we're going to see how many of these might apply to what we're looking at, right? Let's pretend you have seasonal allergies, and you don't like seasonal allergies. The pollen comes down like snow in Houston every couple of months, and we walk outside, and we have to turn on our windshield wipers to get it all out of the way, and we can't see now when we're driving because we're tearing up, when we're mucousy, and we're sinusy, and we're all over the place, and everything we're doing, right? How would we change those situations through this? Does it still apply? Is it possible that our diet is making our allergies worse?
Yeah.
Possibly. Is it possible that we're dehydrated and not able to filter stuff out as quickly as we want, and that's why we're having this accumulation? Could be. Is it possible that we could do something that's non-drug, non-surgical in order to specifically help our allergen-related pathways? Possibly. Here, here's a little trick. Fenugreek is an herb. It's a demucifier in the body. You start pounding fenugreek. Fenugreek just helps purge mucus from the body. So when you are a lactating female and your ducts are clogged in your breasts, or when you're a sinusy person, you can't filter out stuff, if you just start consuming fenugreek like it's going out of style, you'll smell a little bit weird when you walk in the room, but you will thin out those mucuses, those mucus pathways, and you will filter stuff out more efficiently. It's an herb that would apply for that particular situation. Okra also does it, but when you fry it in batter and eat it that way, it kind of messes other stuff up. So okra and fenugreek are two herbs or two plants that break up mucus and would help someone theoretically that has a sinusy allergy type response.
A little ironic that it
Is that weird? Right. It's one of those weird things, it's funny things, but when it goes in the body says, let's slime up the mucus pathways and get stuff out, one way or another. Detoxifying, we talked a little bit about that. Is there a doctor that possibly could help you with the allergies? You've got your ENT, you've got potentially a chiropractor that would crack your neck, whatever it might be. There's different things you could do with this. Are we potentially re-injuring ourselves as we go through the allergic response? Constant exposure to things could do it. Can we remove that injury process though? Like if it's pollen-y outside in Texas, January to September, can I get away from that and still live in Texas? Probably not. So sometimes we can't stop the re-injury because every time you walk out to your car, there's going to be some type of pollen going on, and so sometimes that's a possibility, sometimes it's not. Is there a way that I can manage my stress in other areas so that my body can now prioritize and focus against the allergens, potentially? And is there a way for me to try and get better sleep recovery from it? Also would apply with just the management here. So even something like allergens that happen in Houston every year, every month, sometimes every day, we have a chance to address them without necessarily having to live off of Benadryl where we can't drive anymore, or Sudafed, or whatever it might be. So, I like your list. Y'all did a great job. You're all dubbed temporary doctors, because this is more or less what I would attempt to do as well, something very similar to this. So let's highlight a couple of these that are quickly and easy to do. This one here, unfortunately, we may have to go through a little bit more training to specifically narrow down every possible situation for what you would need to do in that situation. And we'll talk a little bit about this at the end in a little bit. So we're going to skip that one. Water. Water consumption. There's a very big theory that most of us are dehydrated just as a whole. So some people have decided, they have decided, that we should take our body weight, divide it by 2, and drink that many ounces of water per day. So now, if you weigh 100 pounds and you divide it by 2, you probably should be doing 50 ounces of water a day, as a general rule. Those of us who don't weigh 100 pounds and weigh like 200 pounds, hypothetically, need to consume more water than that. I remember in 5th grade when we were learning about like recycling and reducing and reusing and stuff like that, they said the solution to pollution is dilution. And so now if we think about how our body has to deal with junk, it comes in through our food, through our diet, through our sinuses, through our skin, through our whatever. If it's creating an inflammation response, an inflammatory response, we need to just dilute it out. So consuming more water is definitely a good start to that. Well, let's pretend I wake up and I have a cup of coffee, which is a diuretic that causes me to lose more water. Does that now affect my numbers? No, it potentially does now.
I always have to bring up the coffee.
Just some people drink coffee in this world. So if that's the case, it potentially affects our ability to maintain our hydration. So things like sodas and coffee and caffeine and alcohol act as diuretics, which in turn, if we're already dehydrated and have an inflammatory mechanism going on, can make that worse. So we have 2 options. We continue consuming the things that are making us worse and drink more water, which is what we discourage, or we get the stuff that jacks us up out of our lives and we still drink more water, right? So those are options there. Medical assistants, there's different doctors in the world that do different things. We won't talk about that. Detoxifying can kind of work in this world, but it can also work in this world, which we're going to dive into in a bit. Re-injury is something that if it hurts, don't do it, right? Like imagine if you broke your leg, how many of you would go to the gym and go on the treadmill tomorrow? If your leg was broken today, would you go to the treadmill tomorrow? Probably not.
Yeah.
We probably wouldn't for most of us, right? Now, why wouldn't we? For those of us that wouldn't go to the gym tomorrow on a broken leg, why wouldn't you go to the treadmill? Probably going to make it worse, right? Imagine using that broken body part over and over and over again in its inflamed and jacked up state. Now, what if eating gluten makes you worse? Like that person that had an autoimmune thyroid problem. Every day she ate a piece of bread or ate her Pop-Tart in the morning or her Cheerios for breakfast or whatever at night. Is that not jogging on a broken leg in her situation? Yeah. So sometimes whenever I tell patients, look, dude, gluten's killing you. We got to stop this. And they look at me and they're like, but I eat bread every day. Well, would you go jog on that broken leg every day just because you like the treadmill? And we can conceptually see that, but we look at bread and we think, this is healthy because I've been eating it since I was 6 months old. Can't be bad because everyone in America does it, and it's not a regulated substance. You don't have to be 18 to purchase it. You can just eat bread or ice cream. It's just a bowl of ice cream every night right before bed. But if that ice cream is making your allergens worse or your brain clogged or causing sleepwalking, like whatever it might be, and we remove it, we've now removed the possibility for re-injury. From a dietary standpoint, sometimes that's the biggest kicker because we eat habitually. In fact, whenever I have people in the office and we talk about dietary stuff, I always tell them, before you put anything in your body, always remember to halt and ask yourself, am I eating this right now because I'm hungry or because I'm agitated, aggressive, angry, anxious, some type of verb that maybe I should be eating with? Am I lonely or am I tired? And if you can answer honestly with yourself that you are eating because you're hungry, go to town, who cares? But if you're eating because you're depressed, or if we're eating because it's 10 o'clock, the kids are in bed, and I'm turning on The Bachelorette, and it's just time to eat my bowl of ice cream, well, then we should possibly reevaluate why we're eating, because these symptoms may be coming from re-injury, from inappropriate use of how we fuel our body. And so it's a way for us to think about how we're doing and why we're doing what we're doing. Stress management. How many of you can change the stress of everyone else in your life except you? Like, can I tell my wife to not be a stressed person anymore to where she no longer stresses me out? That's kind of a hard conversation, right? It's probably not going to happen. But can I now start trying to manage my life so that if my wife is stressed out, I can better cope with it? So a lot of stress management comes on us. You know, we're going to have deadlines at work. We're going to have people in Hawaii calling us doing things. We're going to have kids. We're going to have traffic. We're going to have environmental stress outside of us. But if I can start to change and monitor how I regulate that, my body will start responding more appropriately as well. And that's why I used the allergen response earlier when we were talking about Texas allergies. You cannot get rid of pollen in Texas. It will be there forever. But if we can change how our body perceives this stress by potentially modifying other stressors in our life, now the allergens no longer become a problem. Still can't get rid of my 6-year-old kids that like wake me up at 2 in the morning though, right? Not legally. No. So we have to look at stressors that are modifiable versus those non-modifiable stressors and see how we can adapt them. And I'll give you a secret. We're saving the best for last because this is the easiest, maybe not easiest. It has the broadest stroke as a modifiable factor in your life for changing the way your health is. Whether it's the ability to not have anxiety and depression going on, or the energy to stay throughout the workday and complete your assignments and your tasks at hand, or to not be pain-free, or to stop against the allergen, or to stop autoimmune conditions, or to increase your fertility so you can have kids, or whatever it might be. This is the number one thing that if I can get every patient in my office to change it, I would put myself out of a job. But because we don't change this first in most instances, it's therapy, it's a symptom-based medicine. Someone walks in and says, I'm infertile, I can't get pregnant, I've been to 12 doctors, they've all stuck me on Clomid and run a bunch of blood work, and I'm still not pregnant. What do I do next? Well, I'm going to change your diet first, not give you something additional. Does that make sense? I may change your diet and then support something else through this, but a lot of times we treat things as a cover-up medicine. And so the dietary change is what stops it at its source. Most people, most of the time, most situations. Sleep and recovery, this also has a large influence through our diet. If we don't manage stress and we don't manage physiology here, this becomes impaired. Oddly enough, you have to be healthy enough to sleep until you just tap out all your resources. So when someone can't sleep throughout the whole night, it tells us something's off physiologically. It may mean that they're mineral deficient. It may mean that their environment is poor and they have lights on that are messing up brain pathways and things like that. It can mean a variety of things. But you have to be healthy enough to sleep. And if sleep is not good in your life, it's just like a check engine light in your car that says, hey, go get my oil changed. Time to look at something. Doesn't mean you're dying on the side of the road yet, but it's just a little warning light that says, hey, something's off kilter. So that's how we can use any and all symptoms. Just figure out what's out of whack and what we can do about it. So now, you've got an inflammatory process. We know inflammation is the root of all evil, or at least all symptoms, and therefore we need to start modifying our inflammation. And we want to do that first and foremost here. Because if we can modify our diet, which is a very easily controllable factor in your life, we can now start seeing the effects of decreasing inflammation and changing physiology. Anybody mind if I erase this? Sorry, I didn't ask first. Okay? Okay. In my office, I have a dry erase board, and I write a lot on it. And sometimes patients go, wait, I got to take a picture. And I take pictures of my dry erase board, but there we go. Diet. If the diet is the number one thing we can modify, which will in turn affect our inflammatory status in our body, what's a healthy diet?
Not what I thought it was.
Could be expensive. Could be. Not $1 meal at McDonald's, right?
Very restrictive.
Possibly restricted. Some people are glass half full, some are half empty. It's okay. No, I'm just joking. So possibly restrictive, possibly expensive, but what is healthy? I mean, what do y'all think of when you think healthy diet?
I think it depends, yeah.
It is potentially different, but if we just were given good general stuff we all know we probably should do more of, right?
Vegetables.
Natural.
Probably more natural, less packaged. Probably more whole food based rather than refined or artificially messed up.
Less fat.
Possibly less fat. I'm sorry.
Balance.
balance, possibly. What is balance, right? So his balance might be less fat. My balance might be, or Alex's balance might be crazy fat. You know, who knows, right? It's interesting when you talk about the whole food concept, though. So there's a condition called beriberi. And beriberi is a condition that many Chinese people went through in the early 1900s. It's when they started refining out the rice and turning it from brown rice to white rice. Because it was easier to distribute amongst the masses if you could refine it, because it would stay longer. But when it is whole form, it was more likely to have bugs come in and eat it up, and it would kind of expire faster. So they started giving out white rice to everybody. And then all of a sudden they started noticing that people were going dementia faster, and people were dying earlier, and they were bleeding out, and they were having all kinds of imbalances, and they didn't know what was going on. And so they kind of realized, you know what, the upper class that's getting the whole fresh rice is fine. The lower class that's getting the white rice are having the issues. And they determined at that point that there was something in the rice that was essential, and the refining process of making it from whole to white was stripping that essential nutrient away, which led them to get beriberi. But what that was vitamin B1. And the simple process of removing the coloration and the shell portion of the rice husk and throwing it into a pure white state caused the nutritional value to diminish, the nutritional status of the people that were consuming it diminished, and they set in with preventable disease called beriberi just by being vitamin B1 deficient. Same thing would happen with scurvy, which is vitamin C, like we hear about the limeys who were the British sailors. They just learned that if they put limes on their boat and sucked on limes and lime juice while they were out and about, they could own the ocean, because they could stay out longer than everyone else who started having their hemorrhaging, like they were just bleeding out everywhere and the teeth were falling out and they were dying prematurely because of it. Yes, sir.
Is this the same concern with GMOs?
Yes and no. I believe GMOs aren't really a good healthy thing for most people, so I try and avoid them. There's debatable research that says it's a good thing or not a good thing. Conventional medicine would say it doesn't matter. I find that it's interesting, though, and a lot of times when they're trying to create tumors in rats and stuff for their studies, they will give them genetically modified stuff because it'll make their tumors go faster. So
Again, it doesn't have an impact?
there's a concept called reasonably considered safe, or it's something like that, where they look in their research and they say, well, based off of a 175-pound person, we think it's reasonably considered safe to have 25 parts per billion of mercury. But yet, if we said, hey, I'm going to go suck down some mercury, you'd all go, whoa, stop. But yet, it's considered reasonably safe. It's generally, I don't remember the exact word, it's some word like that. I don't like GMO stuff, so I try and avoid them. I try and get most of my patients to eat whole food, free range, non-genetically modified, normal food, like people would have eaten 100 years ago, or 1,000 years ago, something like that.
Science maker, so that's exactly what. It's
Right.
expensive, though.
It is. It can be a little bit more expensive because it's harder to do.
We're trying to resort to growing their own stuff in the backyard, but that has its own challenges.
Right. But on the other hand, the concept originally for it, I don't think people that developed GMO food did it with malicious intent. I think they originally came in and said, I think I can splice this tomato with this fish and have this last longer, and it will be more resistant to these pesticides and these herbicides and these bugs, and now we can go feed the world. And I think they had good intentions, but I think it's premature, and this is just speculation, this is me. I think it jacks more people up than it does good, though, when it's potentially preventable by just So, dietary stuff, though, when it comes into my office, the very first thing I try and do with people is diminish their inflammatory exposure from specific foods that they eat. And there are specific things that consistently go in the research and inside, just the research. If I go to a website called PubMed, it's Medical Research Database. You can type in, Hashimoto's, nutrition, and it goes through and pulls, indexes all of the articles that mention those two words inside it, like a Google for medical research. Celiac disease is the most heavily researched thing, which is a gluten-related problem, but they're now doing gluten in relationship to all kinds of other things. So I've got a little table that I have on my computer when people come in the office with some pre-diagnosed condition. I just go to that table and I type in gluten and their condition, and I find the associated research paper for that. I say, research shows that gluten is more likely to jack you up because you've been diagnosed with Hashimoto's. Or you're diagnosed with infertility, gluten messes you up. You have liver cirrhosis, here's a research paper, gluten messes you up. Now I've just got archives of databases of gluten-associated imbalances with a whole bunch of different conditions. So first thing I do with every patient in the office, like 90% of the people in the office, is I just have them go gluten-free for 30 days to begin with. And that's hard for some people because they wake up and they say, but I eat Pop-Tarts and Cheerios every day for breakfast. And I say, well, that's fine, but if we're having a re-injury, and you're like my thyroid person who's having their thyroid munched on every time they eat gluten, it makes the immune system worse, it makes your inflammation worse, and you're becoming more symptomatic because of it. So, the very first thing I do is I look for foods to avoid. Gluten would be the first one. Where is gluten found? Everything. Everything packaged, pretty much. So if it comes out of a box, it probably has gluten in it. Not always, but it probably does. Because gluten acts as a binder and a filler, and it's a preservative. So if I own Betty Crocker, and I want my cupcake to sit on the shelf longer than Kraft, and I have found out that I can put gluten in there to give it an extra 3 weeks of shelf life, as a business person, I want the product in the market as long as possible to accomplish the goals I need to. I may or may not necessarily care that it causes you to have Hashimoto's, or that it makes you not sleep at night, or that you now, have anxiety and depression because you eat this food. I want it to be available as long as possible. I'm going to put stuff inside of it for shelf life purposes, if I'm thinking business on it, right? So gluten is found in things that contain wheat, barley, and rye. So breads, pastas, pastries, cookies, things like that, beer, and Reuben sandwiches, right? That's pretty much all it comes down to.
I like the beer.
So, does that mean every person in this room has a gluten reaction? No, I'm not saying that. The patients who come to see me have usually seen 3 to 15 other doctors first, and they're looking for something different. And they want to know, what can I do with my Hashimoto's, or what can I do with my infertility, or what can I do to lose weight when I couldn't before, and I've done everything else that everyone else is telling me to? Well, I say, well, let's start with just stopping inflammation. So we're going to run a 30-day experiment. For the next 30 days, as if your eternal salvation depends on it. Say, Peter's at the gate, and he's going to ask you, should we gluten today, Suresh? And you're like, yes? He's like, elevator down, right? No, I'm joking. That's not what it was.
What about that one line that we like, stress management? Right? You're using that right now.
So that's the experiment I start with my patients. I have them start by avoiding certain foods. And gluten makes the list 9 times out of 10. If someone was in a car wreck yesterday and they come to see me because their neck hurts and their back hurts and they have titanium in their elbow or whatever it might be, I may not put them on a gluten-free diet at the beginning because they were normal, then they had a traumatic event, and I may just do my structural and neurologic stuff on them. But I may say, you know what, you'll go faster if you get off the gluten because it's going to decrease their inflammation. But most of the time when people come in after car wrecks, they're not looking to change their diet. They just want to feel better. But everyone else who comes to my office has a list of symptoms that involves more than just pain. So we look at things we can do to drop the inflammation systemically throughout the body. Gluten is a very good culprit for it. I then start divvying up things after that for which specific food someone would avoid based off of their blood type. So there are 4 main blood types. Just out of curiosity, how many people know your blood type? Raise your hand. That is higher than normal. Like, at least 60 to 70% of the people in my office don't know their blood type.
We work long hours here and read a lot.
Okay. So there's 4 types of blood types.
We gave a blood transfusion in the break room the other day. It's important to know.
So with the blood type, if we know it, I will start them on a specific dietary restriction program for a 30-day period. Because statistically speaking, people of certain blood types come from specific areas of the world and have specific genetic backgrounds that tend to lead them to have certain inflammatory things. For our Indian friends, generally speaking, y'all are B blood types. Like, how many of you are B blood type, if you know? Oh, only 2
you
of the guys.
too, huh?
Probably yes.
Most of the guys or most of the people that are from Indian kind of Asian areas that way are B blood type. Caucasians, if you can consider yourself Caucasian, it's like 44% here, 43% here. And if you're black, it's like 95% here. If you're Native American, 95% here. If you're an Eskimo or Indian, you're over here. So there's certain blood types that tend to lead people in certain areas of the world, ancestrally. So we have them avoid certain foods based off of that. I'll give you the list for all of them, just so you can write them down on your own. If you want to run through a 30, Asian and Indian as well. They're also but Asians would be mostly B blood types. Could be. Not always.
Her taste buds are Asian.
I do, monthly. I have a question.
Yes, sir.
You have a large family, and you must know your blood types of your children and your wife. So, do they all match? Like, can you guys all consistently?
I'm an O, and my wife is an O, so our kids by default have to be O's.
Got it. So that makes it easy for you.
I'm going to tell you that.
Increasing my stress level. Dinner time comes, man. I mean, and then I got my kids saying I want that.
Right. So you bring up a good question, because I have kids, and my kids eat exactly how I eat. They eat exactly how my wife eats, and we eat the same. And we eat what some people would consider a weird diet, because I don't eat gluten in my life. I follow, for the most part, an O blood type dietary pattern where I don't eat gluten, dairy, corn, or soy. 95 to 98% of the time in my life, those foods aren't even in my house. So I don't have cereal for the kids. We don't eat bread. We just don't do it. Last night for dinner, for example, I had sausage and broccoli. And my wife who's pregnant, she's like, that doesn't sound good to me. I'm just not going to eat. She didn't really eat. And my kid, my 6-year-old, says, I don't want sausage. Can I just get broccoli? And that's a normal conversation we have in our house. So she walked up, and literally her plate was like a mound of broccoli. And she took half a stick of butter and melted it on top of it. Dinner. And she was sitting there laying in the butter and eating broccoli. And that's what was her dinner. I had sausage with mine. I had butter on top of mine. It was no big deal. That's how we mostly eat. When it comes to certain blood types that are mixed, we do the best we can. The good news is the 4 most common things that jack people up are the same across all blood types. So if you have gluten, you're very probably to have reactions equally distributed through the blood types with these certain foods. There's a word here called casein that some people may or may not know. That's in milk protein. So casein and whey are the 2 milk proteins. If you have, from a true immunologic standpoint, if we drew your blood and you had reactions to gluten or gliadin, there's a 70% chance you'd react to dairy if you had a blood marker from it, according to the research. But we're not running our blood work right now, so we're just trying to think, okay, I want to lose 5 pounds before bikini season. I want to, lower my cholesterol. My hair is falling out. I want to put it back. Whatever. We have these thoughts in our mind right now, right? Where we're saying, hey, there's some symptoms I want to do. I'm going to take Chase up on his challenge. I'm going to do this for 30 days and see what happens. In these 30 days, if you avoided gluten, dairy, corn, and soy for all blood types, you would probably get a good response. Not guaranteed, but you'd probably show some type of improvement because you're removing a lot of carbohydrates, you're removing a lot of packaged foods, just processed, modified, adulterated stuff, and you're probably going to have to eat more real food, whole food-based stuff. Now, if you're an A blood type and you see on this list that beef and nightshades are on the list, you're like, holy cow, what are nightshades? I can't eat steak anymore. That might be possible. Nightshades, if you don't know, that'd be like tomatoes, potatoes, eggplant, peppers, tobacco, things like that. Those are a certain category of food that tend to be worse for A blood types. Does that mean every A blood type has to eat off of all 6 of these foods for the rest of their life? No. But if we have inflammation, and if we're symptomatic, and we want to try something that's not a drug, and it's not a surgery, and it's not freaking us out all the time, let's remove a modifiable stressor from our life. Because you can't remove the stress from this office, no matter how much you try, right? You cannot remove the stress from traffic. You may not be able to remove the stress from your home, but you can change what you put in front of you to eat. And you can refuel your body in a different way. And if you fuel your body with stuff that does not enhance the stress response through inflammation, you have a chance of improvement. So generally speaking, if you're an A blood type, I'd have to get off of all these things. If you're an AB blood type, I'd include these, and you get to be added with chicken. I know, it sounds weird, because you're like, wait a second, I'm eating nothing. AB blood types, statistically speaking, do really well on a vegetarian-based program. They have fish occasionally, maybe you throw in red meat or chicken sporadically, but they tend to be the healthiest feeling when they eat almost like a vegetarian, like 90% vegetarian. Maybe 95%, but they're like vegetarian type people. They tend to respond better. A's tend to do well at about 80% vegetarianism, and a little bit of extra meat. B's and O's tend to do really well on like the caveman style diet. Generally speaking, that does not mean that all of our B's need to be pounding meat and chicken like they're all crazy with it, but generally speaking, they do better when they avoid these foods, chicken and nightshades actually. Nightshades, so tomatoes, potatoes, bell peppers, tobaccos, things like that.
Acidic, right? Essentially acidic vegetables.
Not necessarily acidic vegetables, kind of. They're part of a family of vegetables called nightshades. They have something called solanines inside of them. And solanines seem to accumulate more in their neurotoxic disruptors.
You're increasing Heather's stress.
I'm sorry, Heather, for freaking you out. But the good news is,
You don't want
for
to
B blood types, you don't have to stress about it. Just don't stress about it. Because it's stressful now because you don't know different. That's really what it comes down to.
I just realized after you've identified the ethnicities that fall in the bloodline,
Right.
blood types, and the types of foods to avoid for blood,
Right.
kind of explains why those people like chicken so much. But it seems like you like, like those are all the things that I actually enjoy.
Well, think about it. Like, these foods create molecules of change inside of you that lead to addiction.
Oh.
How many of us think, and I'm not picking on anybody, smoking is a healthy activity?
No, actually.
Why does it relax you? It changes biochemistry.
Yeah.
Smoking is not healthy, though. Even though it may make you feel relaxed, or even though it may calm you down, it's still not considered health. But there's an addictive property to them based off of the chemical change that substance introduced into your life.
Within that blood type.
No, smoking's kind of across the board.
Oh.
But these foods aren't even unique for every person. They just are suggestions of where I start. So if someone walks in and they've got something, and I say, you're an A blood type, you got these symptoms, let's run an experiment. 30 days, avoid these. At the end of 30 days, I'm going to ask you about all these questions. Say, how's your energy? Yeah, I'm sleeping through the night. How's your sex drive? Couldn't be better. How is your hair falling out? Hey, it's where it needs to be. It's not falling out anymore. Okay, great. We're on to something. Now let's reintroduce one at a time and see which one's actually jacking you up. Because you don't know which of these they are, because it's impossible to write one book for the whole world to say get off of all these foods. But me as an O blood type white guy from Texas might have a different food genetic makeup than O blood type also from Texas that live down the street from me. So I'll avoid gluten, dairy, corn, and soy. We'll do it together. At the end of that experiment, I may add soy into my life. And if I don't have digestion problems and I can still sleep and I'm not having hot flashes or night sweats or whatever I might have, then I think, hey, maybe, guess what? Maybe soy is okay. Let's go to the next one. And I add corn into my life and all of a sudden I develop seizures. It would take corn out of my life and my seizures go away and I put it back in and I get seizures again. Well, now maybe corn's a big deal, maybe. And so I take it out and I keep it out. And I go to the next food. And so we can tailor specific our dietary habits for each of us uniquely, starting with the common trends that certain blood types go with. O's, statistically speaking, are the easiest to deal with because they can pretty much eat anything. That's why you know that redneck biker guy that drinks 6 packs of beer a night, and he's smoking like a chimney, and he lives to be 112. And you're like, how in the world did you do this? And he's the O blood type that just gets away with whatever he wants. The A blood types and the ABs tend to be more sensitive just across the board. They tend to be more reactive to things. So they walk into Foley's in the perfume aisle and it gives them a headache all of a sudden. And then they go home and they eat something and they have digestion pains because of it. And then they can't sleep at night. They toss and turn all night, and it's because of something they ate 3 days ago. You know, it's just, they tend to be the more delicate, responsive people. Not always. We're talking like 80-20 here. 80% of the time, that's how I would do it. The reason we would do this is because, number one, it decreases inflammation. Number two, it gives us a starting point. If our symptoms get better with the removal of certain foods, we know diet has a factor involved with why we're feeling the way we feel. If after 30 days of doing this, we feel the exact same, and we can be honest with ourselves and with each other as we're doing questionnaires or we're reevaluating our lives, then maybe diet isn't the number one thing for you, and it's something else, and that's why we get to the bottom of that. This, though, is the most preventable and most easily modifiable thing in our day-to-day life. And for most of us, we inflame our bodies 3 to 6 times per day right here on the chalkboard. And if we modify that, dramatic shifts happen in our life. From the girl with Hashimoto's that gets better from just removing gluten. She still eats our ice cream. She still has everything else. She just had to get off of gluten. Or the girl that had the rash that had to get off of dyes and chemicals and stuff. They're not even on our list here. But she knows that if she eats those, it jacks her up. So she has a modifiable diet to not get inflammation and make things worse. I know we're pushing our 1 o'clock time slot, so I'm going to go ahead and wind down here and say this is the very first thing we could start with. 30 days, pick your food for your blood type if you know it. If you don't know it, just start with the top 4 foods. And for 30 days, track what you're eating on an app called MyFitnessPal. It's free. It will not blast your friends on Facebook like Candy Crush does. It's a good way of just tracking what you eat. So that as you remove some stuff and you see what you're eating, you can then reintroduce it, tracking it, and seeing how your symptoms are changing because of it. The next part of this when it comes to dietary modification is actually the macros that we eat, like the fats, the carbs, and the protein. Because once we eliminate the foods that make inflammation, we now want to eat in a way that gives us more energy and less crashes and less roller coaster rides for our blood sugar and stuff like that. So tracking your food gives you a window into your diet and into your health to know what's going on and what's modifiable and how you might change it. So with that being said, thank y'all for coming. 4 foods that you can start with if you don't know what you're doing, up to 6 foods if you do know what you're doing, blood type-wise. Take a 30-day experiment, run a challenge amongst each other in the office, and see what happens. If you want questionnaires just to ask you about symptoms, I'll pass them off to Kelly. Everybody fill out a questionnaire and say, this is my start point. For the next 30 days, we're going to see what happens as an office. We'll hold each other accountable. And at the end of those 30 days, we'll redo our checklist of symptoms. There's like 250 questions to ask about how I'm doing as a health person and watch the change. Most of you will lose weight. Most of you will sleep better. Some of you may get worse. We'll have to see what happens. But most of the time, this is enough to decrease the inflammation to get you going where you want to go. Thank you all very much for your time. I enjoyed it. Y'all had some phenomenal questions. I will be here for a little longer.
You'll be done like 1:30 if you guys want to, have specifics.
Yes, sir.
Do you have a particular take on vaccination?
I do have a take on that. My thought is my family and I don't vaccinate. We don't immunize.
Yeah.
But I recognize that that's not